Hey brand builders, before we go any further today, I want to tell you about one of my other favorite marketing podcasts I think you'll really enjoy. Believe it or not, it's a fun and funny podcast about email marketing called The Email Marketing Show. You know me, I think email is one of the best, scrappiest brand building tools out there. This show will help you do even more with email. For example, they recently did an amazing episode called 6 Lies Your Email Marketing Platform is Telling You, which I love because these guys are so genuine and real in their opinions about what's working and what doesn't in email marketing today. Check it out now by finding the Email Marketing Show wherever you get your podcasts or at emailmarketingheroes.com.
This podcast is coming to you on MPN, the Marketing Podcast Network. There's another show on MPN you might enjoy as well. I'm Jonathan Gaby, host of Marketing Distilled. Each episode, I distill what I have learned and observed in the marketing space and talk with industry leaders like me to help you in your work. Subscribe to Marketing Distilled today. It'll make your marketing that much smarter. Just search for Marketing Distilled wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. My guest this week is Zee Cohen-Sanchez.
We're in a stage of the world right now where we're not very good listeners, particularly folks that run businesses, organizations, right? We've definitely lost that piece of communication, right? Is that really crucial piece of listening, which is really when you're building, and in my opinion at least, when you're trying to build out a strong organization, a strong brand, whether that be political or not political, you really have to listen to people because those are the people that you're trying to solve their problem.
Zee Cohen-Sanchez dropped out of grad school to begin helping with the Bernie Sanders 2016 campaign, and from there ran part of AOC's field program. Now founder and executive director of Soul Strategies, she's leading the charge to flip seats for progressive candidates and change the country. She's been featured in Authority Magazine, Define Magazine, Future Sharks, and more. Zee, welcome to On Brand.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me.
You know, I always love when I get something wrong because, you know, I thought soul strategies, I thought the soul purpose, the soul XYZ, and it's a little punny there because as I connected with you online, your avatar and logo is the sole of a shoe. So, you know, this is not a brand naming show, but you've obviously named a brand. Tell us about your soul meaning, I guess, to get punny back at you.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. I mean, we didn't, the original idea of Soul Strategies came from, the importance that we feel like field plays in political campaigns, particularly for progressive candidates. So, there's a lot of different ways in which, people build out progressive campaigns these days. But really the way, and we know this based on research, the best way to get people out to the polls is to have a direct conversation with them at the door, face to face. So we put a lot of emphasis on field. And so when we thought about, well, what is field, right? Like it's wearing out our shoes when our opponents are not. And I know, AOC talked a lot about this in her campaign, which, as you were saying, I helped run part of her campaign, her field program. And our canvassers like literally did wear out the soles of their shoes. It wasn't until later that, we thought, oh, it's also the soul of a campaign, and what that means. So, yeah, that was sort of an afterthought, so to say.
Yeah, I asked soul purpose, like the onlyness of it, but yeah, you just got another. That's a great word with different levels of meaning with soul, SOUL.
Yeah.
So as we talk about stories, you've got a great teaser in your bio there, but talk a bit about the that's the. I've been reading Dan Pink's Power of Regret, and there's so many things that people, regrets of boldness, of I should quit my job and do X, Y, Z. I should follow this dream. But you've done that. So talk a bit about that and what led you there and that work.
Yeah, definitely. So for me, like everybody else, I think it wasn't something that was, necessarily logical, right? More so a calling. And, I thought calling was sort of cheesy, so to say, right? Like that everybody has a calling and what is that calling and how are we trying to figure that out? But I do believe that there is a sense of truth in that as well. Because like one day I woke up, end of 2020, Trump had just won. Biden had just won the election. But still felt this sense of we're not finished here. This isn't the end. I don't know why I felt that way. I know like a lot of people were extremely happy about Biden's win. Obviously, as was I, getting out a dictator is hugely important. But still, again, that sense of we're not done here and there's a lot left to go. And thinking about, what is my role going to be in that? What is the story I want to tell my kids? And I don't want that to be a disappointing story, as I already feel like it is for my parents, right? And probably for my grandparents too, if they were still alive. So I really dedicated myself and said to myself that, this idea of soul strategies has not been done before. We're not consultants. We don't just give advice. We actually get on the ground with candidates and help them win. And so in order to have an organization like that thrive, I really needed to be putting my all into that. I couldn't be working another full-time job. So I decided that day, the day after Biden won the election, that I was not going to be at my job when I turned 30 in my full-time job. I used to work in the labor movement. So at the time I was working for the nurses union, which was a great job. But still said to myself, I'm not going to be there when I turn 30, no matter what. And luckily, we really blew up that first year, and it was extremely unexpected in a lot of ways. We went from 3 people to 30 people working full time. And so luckily for me, I was able to quit, the day before my 30th birthday. So I handed in my 2 weeks about 6 weeks in advance. And by the day before was my last day. So ever since then, I've really felt like I've been on this mission to help get working class, not just, straight progressives, but working class progressives and helping them get elected to office.
So talk a bit about what that work looks like from your... from the organization and the support that you provide, because you said something earlier that I think, regardless of, and I know this is to see your cheesiness of calling and raise it by using a word that I can't think of a better one for, but regardless of what you're selling, I know, sorry. But regardless of what you're selling, I feel like in this world we've come to lean so heavily on things digital that we forget about really connecting with people. And on the political side of things, that's field, but this making real tangible connections with people, I feel like is something where more of us are missing than we should be.
Definitely. Yeah, it is absolutely missing in the political field as well. And we can see that through all the different developments that have happened over the past 50 years and how branding has changed and how ground game has changed and how building relationships has changed. Like, as you were saying, like the technology of it, that could be both a great thing because, we're able to connect a lot faster than we were before. And as a result, like campaign has changed so dramatically in the last 25 years. If I talk to colleagues all the time that were really prime in the 80s and the 90s, and so much blows their mind these days about what we can and can't do. But there is still that element that as I said was missing, right? Of that as the technology gets better and it makes it easier for us to connect, it also makes it a lot easier to not have meaningful relationships with people, right? And that's a huge challenge in campaigning because it's not like we're not developing friendship relationships with people, right? It's not the same as social media and the way that we connect with our friends on social media, but instead the way that we talk about serious political issues with strangers, which is, is scary, essentially, right? I mean, we don't even want to do that at Christmas and at Thanksgiving, yet alone going and knocking on some stranger's door to have a conversation in, 2022. So that's a big part of what we're trying to do with our candidates is really lean in on that. And to be able to do that, we need to raise a lot of money because fortunately or unfortunately, however you look at it, ground game and having these conversations means that we have to pay people to get out there and to do that work. And so that's a big part of what we focus on with our candidates really early in the process is raising money. And so we really help them do that. We set them up with a call time manager. We set them up with lists. We help them call constituents. We definitely encourage them to do polling because how can you talk to issues if you don't know what those issues are? And so we really try to build it from that foundation of fundraising and of getting that money in. And then we push it into the digital space and then into the press space. And then ultimately, last but not least, into that door-to-door field conversation. And we think that that's really the way that we're going to continue to win campaigns, especially as we get, quote unquote, more disconnected in the digital space.
On Brand will be right back after this. When it comes to marketing, time and place are everything. But with 1 million messages per minute and not enough hours in the day, how do you really catch your target audience's attention? LinkedIn can help you speak to the right people at the right time. They deliver you quantity and quality with targeting tools that allow you to reach your precise audience, down to their job title, company name, location, and more. This means your ads are being seen by those who matter. That's why LinkedIn is #1 in B2B display advertising in the US. As a thank you to their customers for helping them grow 3 times faster than the competition, LinkedIn is offering a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN.
Hey there, it's Jason Falls. If your company or maybe one of your clients sells to marketers, you look for advertising channels that guarantee business marketers are paying attention, right? Let me introduce you to the Marketing Podcast Network. You're listening to it right now. It's a network of podcasts all about marketing. So 100% of MPN's audience are marketers. Reach them by advertising on the Marketing Podcast Network. Learn more and find our media kit at marketingpodcasts.net.
Now, back to the show. So, talk a bit about, we've been talking about the digital connection, the disconnection, and, what are some of the big lessons? Because I mean, you talk about polling and learning about people, and I feel like there's a lot of these lessons that apply to us in the world of organizational communication and connecting with our people as well. Of knowing that. What are some of the other big lessons that, beyond the world of a political campaign, applies to just connecting and growing organizations?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that, it's funny. I actually had a conversation like this a couple of days ago. And what the person I came to a conclusion with, one of my staffers actually, was that we, honestly, we're in a stage of the world right now where we're not very good listeners, particularly folks that run businesses, organizations, right? We've definitely lost that piece of communication, right? Is that really crucial piece of listening, which is really when you're building, and in my opinion, at least, when you're trying to build out a strong organization, a strong brand, whether that be political or not political, you really have to listen to people because those are the people that you're trying to solve their problem, right? Like the issue in for me is that progressives can't raise money. And so that I'm trying to solve that problem, right? But for any organization, what problem are you trying to solve? And are you listening to the person that is having that problem, right? Like that is really critical. And that's something that we really did early on. We decided that we were going to really listen to candidates and what their struggles were, and then try to speak to those struggles and try to fix those struggles, so that we could make it more of a positive experience moving forward, and also be able to expand our brand, because the more that we know about those struggles, the more that we can help change them.
Yeah, boy, you hit the nail on the head when you said you have to. I mean, it sounds so simple, but in my experience, some of the best advice often is. But you have to listen to people to be able to solve their problem, and I think that's another unifying thing between the world of politics and organizations and products. We tend to say, I'm here, I'm running for X. I'm here, I'm selling product X. And instead of what's someone's story, what's someone's pain, instead of I have this to sell you on raising money, on donating, on voting for me, instead of kind of backing it up, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, a lot of candidates really struggle to fundraise too. This is a common problem with sales, which is also a common problem in fundraising, is that, you should be talking less, essentially, right? Like, that's what we tell our candidates is like, almost always they're like, oh, I can't find the right pitch. I don't know what to say. I've already said that I'm, going to be the first woman or the first Black person candidate or whatever it is, right? And I've told them about my struggles. But the first question that we always ask is, what did you ask them? Right? Like what are the questions that you're asking your constituents? Are you building those relationships? Are you building trust? Do they trust you? Like, those are all the questions that are more important in fundraising. And then same thing in sales too, right? Like, we never really sell. That's just our, as a person running this business, I don't even feel the need really to sell anything. If I can solve your problem, great. I'm let's work together and let's solve your problem together. But the whole idea of, selling, right? And putting this product out there, and same thing with the candidate, putting the candidate out there without having that deeper connection and that deeper conversation just really doesn't work. And I think especially as we get post-pandemic, if that ever really truly happens, but even during the pandemic, right? People are craving even more that connection, more so than they ever have before. So we really need to be speaking to it.
Well, I'm not totally from outside of your world. I've worked on some local campaigns, and I'm actually married to an elected official.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my wife is the mayor of our community, Coralville, Iowa. Nice. And this sounds like the spouse saying, my wife's really good at XYZ, but I think it's that listening thing. She goes out on the doors and spends forever out there, and I think what she's good at, but what so many of us, and I think it's communicators, whether that's someone who's a candidate, who's a hand raiser that says, yep, I'm gonna fix healthcare, I'm gonna get in there and do XYZ, or I have this new exciting product. They're people persons.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes that same strength can really get in the way. Because I love that I can hear that advice, and I feel like there's lots of us that should be getting it, you should be talking less, but it's scary because we have a tendency to want to fill that silence. I don't know if that's the only hard thing, but it's seemingly simple, but yet we can't seem to not do it.
Yeah, that silence. It's interesting that you bring up that silence because, when it comes to fundraising, we talk about that silence a lot and what that means and how to essentially get over it, right? And to just let them. And it usually happens in fundraising. It happens, after the ask, right? So you have this great conversation and then it comes down to, I'm going to have to ask for money now, right? Like, and so you ask for that amount, whatever that is. We say to be specific, $250 or whatever it is. And then there's going to be silence. And like that silence is going to be uncomfortable, and it could last a minute. Like, who knows how long it could last. And so we always tell candidates, like, don't speak in that moment. Let them think, let them digest, let them understand what you said. Because if you start speaking, you're going to speak yourself right out of a donation, because really that's all that happens. So, it's funny that you mentioned that, because it's such a huge part of like the political process, and not just with fundraising, but also with door conversations too. Like, the last question at the door is, can I count on your vote? Right. And like, there's going to be awkward silence in that too. And just sort of letting that happen and sitting in that space, I think it's really important, especially for leaders and for political candidates to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's, I think, is a big takeaway, and another one of those seemingly simple things is that silence is important. I think we tend to think of it as nothing's happening, mm-hmm. but really something very important is happening. So, talk a little bit about, because the other interesting kind of intersection here in working with candidates in building brands is the brand of a candidate. Where does that play in? It's this odd intersection of the other thing that we talk about here. Not always in the political realm, but that's this kind of oft misunderstood personal brand, and some pushing back and wondering, is that even a thing? Should it be a thing? And with a candidate, they often are the brand.
Yeah, they often are the whole brand. That's right. I mean, for us, it definitely is a thing, because we understand that there are definitely going to be people that we have to have conversations with at the door, right? But then there are also going to be people that aren't going to answer. And how do we connect with those people? I mean, on any given day, the average answer rate at the door is between 15 and 25%. So how do we get to that whole other 85 to 75%, right? We're going to have to get to them online. We're going to have to get to them on the phones and in other ways. And so having that branding is really important, because it makes it seem as though it is a professional campaign, even though sometimes it might not be. So it's really important, and it's, what we tell candidates too, because we have a whole branding wing of Soul Strategies, is, the last thing that matters are things like your colors, right? Like, or what looks pretty. It's really about building out your story and how that relates to your brand. So that's a big part of what we focus on, especially for political candidates, is how can we do that effectively to really tell your story?
I have to chuckle at the last thing that matters are your colors, but it's like that's also our human instinct. Like, what we gravitate towards are the things that are easily seen, the visuals. But you mentioned strong candidates, and that's where I do think there's a lot of overlap in the world of branding, and strong candidates are strong brands. And I think some people on the personal brand, political brand say, well, you mean logo? Because that's, again, an easy thing to see. And it has nothing to do with a visual icon that goes with something. They're strong brands because we know the story, like you said. We know what they stand for.
100%. Yeah, no, I totally, and that's one of the first things our candidates ask about too, is like the logo and how that's going to fit into all of this. And I mean, sure, like pretty logos are great, right? Like when you see Pepsi, you know it's Pepsi, and when you see Coke, you know it's Coke. But really, as you said, like the strongest brands, like the colors are really sort of irrelevant and the logo's irrelevant. I mean, one of the best brands that we saw, who I've already sort of admitted that I love deeply, is Bernie Sanders' brand, right? Like his logo is nothing special. I mean, it's really, it's a blue and red line underneath his name and very basic font. But what his brand really is his slogan, not me, us. and what that means, like as a community. That's really the true brand. And that's what we believe makes great brands for candidates, is when you can associate that slogan and that moral compass really like with the candidate and with what they're trying to do.
So we were imagining this elevator pitch of what you do, and I'm hopping off, and I say, "Oh, that was a really good way of thinking about brand." What's one thing, an idea starter that someone looking to define their personal brand can ask themselves?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, for political candidates, it's sort of two things. It really starts with your why, like why, and that's always the first question that we ask candidates when we start working with them. It's very simple. Why are you running for office? And you would be surprised how many people don't know, and that's a real problem, right? But good candidates, they have a why, and their why is very deep, and it's usually connected to their personal story. That's really the biggest thing. The second thing is really thinking about your own community and what you believe your community needs and should have, right? And tying that into your brand is also going to be extremely important throughout the process.
Awesome. And, you were quick to say if it's a political brand and as I guess a broad brand thinker, I would say that those questions I think are pretty universal. That why we need that, and knowing our community. It might mean a different thing, but a community might be the people who you're theoretically creating something for. So.
Definitely. Absolutely. I mean, just one that I can think of off the top of my head is Nike, right? Like, I mean, their supporting of Colin Kaepernick really spoke to, and not to say that they are the best brand ever, because they're not. They've done a lot of things that have not been great. But really, that decision was a decision that I believe, came from them looking out into the community and saying that is something that had to happen. It wasn't a choice. It was something that they really needed to do because that's what the community wanted to see them do, right? So I think, brands that are out front of that faster, right, are going to be more well respected, especially like as we progress further and further into the future.
Awesome. Well, we talked a bit about Nike, but it is the point in the podcast, Z, where I get to ask you for a brand that has made you smile recently.
Oh, a brand that's made me smile. So I was actually thinking, recently, so there's somebody, and I don't know, how many people on your podcast are following politics closely, but I highly, highly, highly encourage everybody to go look up this guy. His name's Gary Chambers. He's running for U.S. Senate in Louisiana. And if you want to talk about a strong brand and an amazing brand, this is this guy, right? Some people will go and look at his Instagram, they'll look at his page and they'll be like, I don't get it straight away, right? Because it's not all pretty fonts and colors, and some things are a little mismatched, right? But the meaning behind what he's doing and his advertisements, more so than anything. One of his advertisements that went extremely viral online a couple weeks ago, he's had a few that have gone viral recently, but one of them that really stood out to me was he's smoking a fat blunt in the middle of just marshland, basically, in Louisiana, right? And he's talking about the decriminalization of marijuana and what that would mean for Louisiana, what it would mean for his campaign. And it really speaks to me, and obviously speaks to a lot of people because, it went extremely viral. So he's definitely somebody to look out for. That's a brand that's made me smile. I'm sure that, your listeners will take a look and they'll love his videos and what he's been up to.
Awesome. Well, I love hearing about all sorts of different brands, and especially interesting political brands too. Z, where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so you can go to our website, soul-strategies.com. Don't forget the dash. And also you can take a look. We're on all social media platforms. You can find us on TikTok under Soul Strategies, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. They're all just at Soul Strategies.
Awesome. And we'll link up to that in our show notes at onbrandpodcast.com. Z, thanks for being on brand with us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It was really a pleasure.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.